What is up? Welcome to another edition of the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast. It's me, your man, MG Marcas Grant, alongside the Fantasy Hall of Famer Michael Fabiano and the Fantasy Viper Graham Barfield. I feel like fall has sort of shown up here. Sort of.
It has.
In Los Angeles.
Although it's supposed to get warm again.
It is.
Which is weird. Like LA weather, it's like it starts to feel seasonal and then suddenly it gets warm again.
Yeah, it's super, super nice out this morning. It's kind of, there's like a nice, cool, crisp breeze in the air.
Right.
Falls in the air. It's nice.
I mean, the thing about living in LA, for those of you who haven't necessarily been here or spent a lot of time here, this time of year, it's hard to dress because you have to really dress in layers because in the morning there will be like a slight chill in the air. Like I'm not going to compare it to like other places that get actual cold, but there will be a chill. So you maybe have like a jacket or whatever, and then in the middle of the day it gets hot, so then you're down to just like a t-shirt, and then as the day goes along, you know, especially when you get near the coast, like the fog comes in, the wind picks up, and so then by the end of the night you like need an actual jacket again. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah, you can kind of have like 3 different outfits. It's nice if you like changing clothes.
Yeah,
me,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's great. So
And we also get to deal with the cold of the studio as well. So
that makes it hard to dress for work.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, because like
here,
even when it's a little bit cool out, then you get into the studio and it's like, are they hanging meat in here? Like, why is it so cold?
Yeah, that's
always
that's a
cold
whole
in there.
different set of circumstances.
Always,
It's
yeah.
wild.
Uh-huh.
So we have plenty to talk about as we break down what was Week 9. Of course, there is still the Monday night game to come. It's Fabs versus Eddie.
Yeah, Eddie, we can't be friends today.
Cowboys versus Giants on Monday
I fear that
night.
game because yesterday the whole day, and I did it the last couple of weeks. You know, I watched the games and I'm thinking, how the hell did the Cowboys lose to the Jets? How did we lose to the Jets?
That's what everyone's wondering.
How the hell did we lose to the Jets? And I'm hoping that we're not cursed at that stadium this year because, you know, I would hate to lose to the Jets and the Giants in the same season at MetLife.
I guess you're going to find out.
I was definitely hoping that Shepard would be playing, give the whole crew to Daniel Jones. But look, Faz, I'm not going to be greedy. Like I don't need a win. Let's just.
You know what I need?
I don't want Daniel Jones embarrassed on national television like Eli's been embarrassed way too often these past few seasons. Let's everyone stay healthy, you know, and then I'll be fine.
I need a lot of Evan Engram, and
Sure, hopefully.
that's about it.
Yeah,
Go Cowboys.
As long as Eddie gets a few Saquon Barkley highlights and some big Evan Ingram catches.
Couple nice highlights.
need.
Keep him healthy. Daniel Jones, no egregious turnovers. A couple touchdown passes. Like it's a competitive game. Like that's fine. That's all I ask for.
I'm just trying to figure out how did we lose to that team? That team is horrible. Like ever since they beat us, and if you remember, that game wasn't like necessarily a blowout, but I mean,
they were in fairly good control.
Right. I mean, there was never a point in the game where I'm thinking, all right, we got this.
Yeah. Well,
and it was the Jets.
That was the game that Amari got hurt. Really
I don't
early,
care.
Right? Still,
I don't care if our offensive line had some injuries in that game. I don't care if Amari. It was the freaking Jets. They just got embarrassed by the Dolphins, who were the worst team in the league before the Jets lost to them.
Which, by the way, that game at no point yesterday was like,
no.
I was like, oh, the Jets.
And by the way,
the Jets are going to get back in this.
We
at no
screwed
point
up.
That way today.
Okay, we forgot that Ryan Fitzpatrick had another revenge game, and it's like the Ryan Fitzpatrick revenge game tour this season.
They're all
right?
revenge games.
They're all, and eventually he's got the Bengals, which I think is later in the season. It might be Week 16. I can't remember.
Yep.
But like the Ryan Fitzpatrick revenge tour just keeps on rolling. He had a very solid game against, I believe it was the Bills, and then he had a very solid game against the Jets yesterday. Now they've got the Colts coming up. That's not a revenge game. But still, like Ryan Fitzpatrick is back on the fantasy radar.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
he is.
He is. It's wild there. So, of course, you just heard from our faithful producer, Senior Edward L. Murphy, Esquire. So it should be interesting tonight. The Cowboys versus Giants. You know, we'll see. I know that that still has some fantasy impact with guys like Dak and Amari and Zeke and Saquon and Evan Ingram and that sort of stuff. So it's at least worth watching, if nothing else, for that, even if you don't have necessarily any rooting interest in it. So there we go. That's all out of the way. So let's do some news.
Let's do the news.
First bit of news coming out of Indianapolis. Jacoby Brissett ended up leaving yesterday's game early after what looked like both an ankle and a knee injury. I mean, on the exact same play, he got his foot stepped on and sort of turned his ankle a little bit, and then his offensive lineman fell and rolled into his knee. That took him out for the remainder of the game. Now, Frank Reich says it looks like a sprain. He is being classified right now as being week to week. So you're going to have to keep an eye on that going forward. In the meantime, Brian Hoyer stepped in, threw 3 touchdown passes. Didn't have a ton of yards, but moved the ball efficiently. especially considering he was coming in cold, like as a surprise opportunity here. So, I mean, I know we'll get to waiver wire guys a little bit later, Fabs, but, I mean, Brian Hoyer's got to at least be on the radar right now.
Dude, they got the Dolphins next week. Yeah, he is. I mean, remember, guys, this is Bimageddon. Okay, you got the Broncos, the Texans, the Jaguars, the Patriots, the Eagles, the Redskins, all off. At least 3 pretty good fantasy quarterbacks out of those 6 teams. Okay, Brandon Allen. He beat the Browns.
I want to watch him and see exactly what
beat
happened
the Browns.
in that game.
I almost feel bad for the Browns fans like the Miz and stuff like that because he was so excited for Super Bowl. They were going to contend against the Patriots, and that team is trash. Freddie Kitchens is not going to be employed very much longer there. Maybe if he makes it through the rest of the season, we'll see, but that's going to be about it. Regardless, back to the Hoyer point, dude, pick him up. 2 QB Superflex leagues. I'm desperate. Maybe you have Deshaun Watson and Carson Wentz on your team. I don't know. Like, that's very possible. There are a handful of quarterbacks this week that you can pick up and play, or who may be on your bench that you could play this week. That you might have to do that. I'm going to talk about that on the TV side on Tuesday. But Hoyer's one of them. Ryan Tannehill's one of them. Right? Ryan Fitzpatrick's one of them. All of a sudden, we're looking at these guys who weren't drafted. They've been backups to start the season, and now they're going to be potential starters. Daniel Jones is one of them. Jimmy G is one of them.
We got Bipocalypse coming.
By the way,
yeah.
if you're Aaron Andrews' husband,
Jarrett Stoll?
what did you think of Garoppolo calling your woman baby?
You know what? If you're Jarrett Stoll, I think you're not all that weird.
Little weird.
You're not all that weird.
That's a little weird on national TV. I mean, it wasn't Joe Namath to Susie Colbert creepy.
Well, no,
it was a little weird
because Jimmy was sober.
It was. It was a little weird. All right, sorry. Here.
Oh man! Just as a side note, wrapping back to the Brissett point, could you imagine having a 300-pound lineman fall on your leg?
No.
Like, I watched that replay like at least 15 times yesterday because it was like one of the main games we were watching. And I just kept thinking, like, what would that be like to have a 300-pound man fall on your leg?
I would get up and say, I'm done.
Yeah,
I
would
not
probably
anymore.
never play another
Gotta
snap in the
hurt.
NFL.
Not
ever.
playing anymore. I'm done. Well, we talked a little bit about the Giants. Sterling Shepard is back in the concussion protocol, so he is not going to be available.
Yeah.
And now, Graham, this is becoming an ongoing thing now, and you start to wonder, I guess big picture maybe about Shepard's career, but at least in the short term, what his availability is going to be for the rest of the season and what this means for, say, Golden Tate and kind of the rest of that passing game there.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. This is now Shepard's obviously his second concussion of this year, and any time that these guys get re-into the concussion protocol, it's definitely not good long term. For fantasy, the spin is pretty simple. I mean, Golden Tate has been like a PPR monster over the last couple of weeks without Shepard in the lineup. I mean, I think he's seen like over 8 or 9 targets in every game. He's had over 80 yards in every game. I think Tate will have another nice game tonight against the Cowboys, especially with Shepard out. But yeah, the Giants really need to get him back on the field because, I mean, their base offense between Tate and Shepard and Ingram is really nice on paper. They just haven't been able to get those guys all on the field at the same time together this year, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been the hard part, and I know that we had high expectations for Sterling Shepard, and it just hasn't happened.
I would do as much as I was on Odell Beckham to the Browns, can we do like some sort of reverse engineering and get Odell Beckham back on
to the
Giants?
Or
back to Daniel
why
Jones?
don't we do this?
That would be fun.
Why don't we trade Eli to Cleveland? Listen.
At this point,
that is something that I never thought that we would be actually wishing into like existence. I miss the days of Eli and OBJ. I do.
Yeah.
I miss them.
If you think
OBJ was good with Eli.
if you think Baker is dust behind that offensive line, just watch Eli behind the Browns offensive line.
All right, I get it, but still, I mean, I'd rather see Eli throwing him passes. But did you see Baker's post game look that he had?
Yeah.
I saw the memes.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm drafted by the Browns. Hey!
Yeah.
And after 9 weeks, I play for the Browns.
Yeah.
He looked like a homeless guy with that trench coat on.
I saw a lot of Wet Bandits memes.
Yes, that's right.
A lot of Daniel Stern.
That's right.
Home Alone.
Yeah, yep.
So Gardner Minshew wasn't great.
That's
in
not
London.
even. You're being nice.
Wasn't great
You're
in
being
London
nice.
as the Jaguars lost to the Texans. And Nick Foles looks like he is ready to go after his collarbone injury in Week 1. So the Jaguars have a bye, and now the reports are Doug Marrone will wait during the bye to make a decision about who will be his starter coming up in Week 11 for Jacksonville. Now, I feel, in some ways, I feel sort of bad for Gardner Minshew because he stepped in played pretty well, moved the offense, was very productive. He had a bad game at the worst possible time, right? When the starter is about ready to come back, and now all of a sudden his job is on the line. I mean, literally 2 weeks ago, we were talking about, man, Nick Foles might never get his job back. Now he has a bad game at the worst time.
That game was awful.
I really hope that Doug Marrone does not hold that game against Minshew.
I hope he does.
Because
I want Nick Foles.
Because Gardner was free. He was so good for the first 8 weeks there in Jacksonville, and obviously then he has to go across the Atlantic and play a really tough road spot there.
Give it back to Foles. That was awful, dude. That was just, I mean,
really,
from a fantasy standpoint, everyone who needed a quarterback was trying to get Minshew. I started him in one of my leagues. Houston had given up 20 points a game to quarterbacks. They had given up the most fantasy points to wide receivers, and Minshew basically neutered every receiver on that roster, including DJ Chark, who may have been the biggest disappointment in fantasy football this week. Give the offense back to Nick Foles. Just do it. And I get it. Minshew has been a fun story. There was a half a dozen people dressed as Gardner Minshew here at the NFL offices
Which might
on
have
Halloween.
sucked his power out of it.
It might have been. Maybe his powers don't go overseas. I don't know, because he was awful. And in the fourth quarter, he looked like a guy who didn't belong as an NFL starter, that's for sure. But he's also, I mean, let's be honest, he's had really good games against the Jets. They suck. The Bengals suck, okay? Carolina, that was an impressive performance on the road against that defense. But he hasn't played like the greatest defenses in the world. Kansas City's defense isn't any good.
He had a decent game against Denver.
Right.
He had a decent game against Tennessee.
I mean, 16 points against Denver is okay, but from fantasy, it's not great. So listen, it's been a fun story with the mustaches and the Burt Reynolds comparisons and the Smokey and Bandit. I loved it all. It was fun. From a fantasy standpoint, I want him out. I want Foles in there. I want to see what he could do.
So basically, you lost and now you're salty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm definitely.
That's what it is.
I mean, no, I'm mad. I mean, I remember I seen Jamie Eisenberg, our pal over at CBS, tweet out, I had Gardner as my start of the week at quarterback. I'm like, hey, Jamie, we all liked him, man. I mean, it was a great matchup.
Like, whatever.
He was horrible.
It is the vagaries of fantasy football.
It's time to go back to Foles. You gave him a lot of money. See what he can do.
This happens every single year where a quarterback in a great spot, we love all these pass catchers, they'll just fail. And this
just happens, dude. I mean, it happens. But
yeah,
I'm on. Let's see what Foles has.
I will say they do have a big amount of sunk cost into Foles. And I think
play him.
I think you're probably right that at least from just like a pure
financial standpoint,
but also how we know how these things have gone in the past, that they will probably try to go back to their guy that they have a huge investment in, and whether that's the right choice, I really won't pretend to know. But I think when you have a rookie quarterback playing as well as Gardner's played, you just stick with him. Because
I just think it's funny that he has a bad game and everybody's like, screw it, it's over, he's done.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is the fantasy community.
Let's not pretend that Nick Foles is exactly, a Hall of Fame quarterback here, right? Like, he got paid a lot of money because he was the best option. He was the nearest port in the storm for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yes.
And he rolled in at the right time, and they threw a king's ransom at him.
Give him a shot. That's all I want.
So, there we go. That's pretty much everything you need to know.
Well, that was the news.
Hey, quick note. Meant to mention this at the top of the show, but I'll get to it now. We are on YouTube, by the way. This is a new development. I think it just started last week, but we are putting our shows up on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you search for NFL Podcasts, plural, you can subscribe to that handle. They're going to start putting our shows up there along with ATN. I don't know. Is Move the Sticks going to be there as well, Eddie? I'm not sure.
So, yeah, all the podcasts, you can now listen to them on YouTube. For now, the only image you'll see is, like, the show loop, like the logo for every show. So, NFL Fantasy Football Podcast, Move the Sticks, DDFP, ATN, all the logos will be on there. We're hoping to get fantasy on the NFL Fantasy Football YouTube channel soon. And then maybe in the future, who knows, we may just do the wide shot of you guys in the studio. So, we're going to work on all that. So, a lot of different ways now to access this great podcast.
Cool. Yeah, so go check it out in case, whatever, you want to watch a monitor loop for a while. But eventually, hopefully, it'll be our faces so you can watch us stare at our laptops for an hour.
It's literally all we do is, like,
Yep.
because we're not really on camera for most of this or for any social media purposes.
Every once in a while, I take a sip of tea. It's really exciting. But anyway, it's a new way for you to listen to the podcast. You can check it out. Hopefully you do. Subscribe to the NFL Podcasts handle. Subscribe to the NFL Fantasy handle on YouTube while you're at it as well, because we're putting clips of Fantasy Live up there. Also League One, if you haven't checked that out as well. So there are different ways to see what we do, to hear what we do, in the event that you're not already sick of us already. So there you go. Hey, Week 9, just about in the books, minus that one last game that we already mentioned. So just kind of time to go back through what happened on Sunday and sort of break some of these things down. Starting with the running back position this week. So, Fabs, is Melvin Gordon fixed now? He had 80 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He's fixed now, right?
I certainly hope so. I had just traded for him in one of my leagues, and I traded Lamar Jackson because I'm loaded at quarterback. But it looked like that game, and remember, it was the first game without Wisenhunt as the OC,
right?
Looked like last year's Chargers, right? It looked like Melvin Gordon had his featured role. Melvin Gordon was the goal line back, and Austin Eckler was sprinkled in. And that was sort of what the Chargers have been. And I feel like they came out and won the game against a team that had lost, once going into this week?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I feel like, and Eckler's great. I get it. Eckler's a talented back. But from here on in moving forward, I really believe that Melvin Gordon, and it took a few weeks for him to sort of, get his sea legs back, but he played 61% of the snaps. Eckler was at 35%. I think this is probably what you're going to see moving forward.
Yeah, I will say the Packers literally did not show up in this game. I mean,
wild.
Through 3 quarters, they did not move the ball on offense whatsoever. They were in third down and long on literally every single one of their drives. I mean, Melvin Ingram and Nick Bosa had their way with Aaron Rodgers early in the game. I think that really helped. The game script really helped getting Melvin Gordon the ball 23 times in this spot. It's interesting, obviously, that Ken Wisenhunt gets fired, and the very next game, Melvin Gordon plays a season-high snap rate, gets 20 carries for the first time this season.
Yep.
But I think the game script had a lot to do with this. But that being said, though, I'm sitting here kind of poo-pooing on Gordon's performance. You get the Raiders and the Chiefs the next 2 weeks. So, I mean, it's 2 more good matchups.
It lines up for him.
Yep.
Yeah.
It does.
And maybe they did solve something along their offensive line, because for 4 straight weeks, they did not run the ball. I don't think they had over 40 yards
They did not
rushing.
have 4 straight games with under 40 rushing yards.
It was ridiculous. So maybe they got something a little bit going with their offensive line this week. I don't know. But game script really helped here, because the Packers were not at all an opponent.
Right. It's curious. I wonder how much of it was a change at the offensive coordinator position and maybe just kind of a new way of looking at things. How much of it was just kind of a shakeup in the locker room? Like, you see a move like this, and I feel like that sort of just wakes everybody up. I mean, from the top down, and whether or not the Chargers were like, oh, wait, hey, we gotta get going again. Maybe there's a little fire under them. Also, this just sets up for the Chargers doing the typical Charger thing of making a run at this point and getting all their fans, you could put all the Chargers fans,
the
dozens of them,
in the studio in our campus, and we'd still have room for people to walk around.
Dozens of them.
The StubHub Center was very quiet yesterday.
The
Chargers dominated.
Getting them excited, and then having just the most heartbreaking, agonizing loss somewhere in like week 14 or 15 to end their playoff hopes, because that's just the Charger way. So at the start of the year, we were really excited about rookie running backs, right? I mean, Josh Jacobs was like the first rookie running back off the board in most drafts, but we had high hopes for David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, even Devin Singletary, and it took them a while to get going. But the last few weeks, they really started to kind of pick some things up. So I'll start with you, Graham. Those 4 guys, Jacobs, Singletary, Montgomery, Sanders, rank them how you're feeling about them right now.
Yeah, I think you have the order pretty much. I would flip Montgomery and Singletary, but Jacobs and Montgomery are the top 2 guys. Devin Singletary, man, he looks so good. Mm-hmm. And now they're starting to feature him more. Over the last couple weeks, the Bills have kind of shifted away from Frank Gore. Singletary's played 2/3 of the Bills' snaps, and Frank Gore's basically not playing on passing downs, and now Singletary gets a chance to just absolutely smash the Browns and the Dolphins over the next couple weeks. I love Devin Singletary over the next couple weeks. I think he's going to be a really solid RB2 play. But I got to stand for Josh Jacobs. He is so freaking good.
He's been so good.
There were people out there that doubted that he could be a featured player because he wasn't in Alabama. He had only a couple games, maybe with 20 or more carries, and he has more than proven that he's a workhorse back in the NFL. He has been awesome.
As Graham Barfield likes to say he is smashing.
He is so good.
And I think the biggest part of it too is that the Raiders have trusted him in that role. I mean, because compare that or contrast that with David Montgomery, who now is playing well, but it just seemed like early on Matt Nagy didn't trust giving him the football consistently. Now that they are, he's starting to do some things. But from day one, John Gruden trusted Josh Jacobs to carry a big workload in Oakland.
Yeah, well, hats off to John Gruden, honestly, because their team is competitive each and every week. Their offensive line.
Fun to watch, man.
They are. They're fun to watch. Their offensive line has really stepped up, and Derek Carr is playing efficient ball, and Josh Jacobs, man. Josh Jacobs is just so good.
Week 1, Josh Jacobs had 24 touches. Which,
yeah.
They just right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate, Gruden showed us exactly what he wanted to do.
They believed in him.
Yep.
So Ronald Jones started the game for Tampa yesterday. On the opening drive, had 4 carries for 28 yards, got in the end zone. It sort of kind of faded a little bit as that game became a track meet, and so it kind of became about the quarterbacks between Winston and Russell Wilson. But
it was fun to watch, by the way.
It was a lot of fun to watch. Yeah. But in the end, Ronald Jones ends up playing the majority of the snaps there. He has a decent game, all things considered. And, I mean, Fabs, we have been asking for the Bucs to just give us one guy, to lean on one guy to just at least make it interesting. Yeah. So can we start to think that Ronald Jones is now the guy in Tampa?
I mean, really, like when we start to feel like one guy is taking over, this has happened earlier in the season too.
Right.
Ronald Jones started to, we could pick him up off the waiver wire, and then it went back to Peyton Barber. So you never really know with this offense, but I would suggest that clearly based off of what we saw yesterday, that if you were thinking of starting a Tampa Bay Buccaneer next week, and they do have the Cardinals, which could be another track meet. By the way, that game, Seattle, Tampa, so much fun to watch. Mm-hmm. Arizona, Tampa could be as much fun to watch from a fantasy standpoint. So I would go in there, and if Jones is out there on the waiver wire, which he is in a lot of leagues, I would not be adverse to picking him up and rolling him out as a flex.
I'm just so sick of this Bucs backfield. I mean, 3 weeks ago, Dari freaking Ogunbowale was playing like over 50% of the snaps.
Right.
It's just, oh my God.
It's hard to figure.
I don't think honestly, I really don't think even Bruce Arians knows week to week how these running backs are going to play out. It's just a pure hot hand and kind of game flow type deal. And for fantasy, it makes it completely useless.
Man,
I will say, I mean, Rojo looks a lot better this year, which is it's a small bar to hop, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Ronald Jones looks so much better this year, and so much better than Peyton Barber.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing: we sort of know what Peyton Barber is at this point in his career, right? Like we're still trying to figure out what Ronald Jones is, and I think you heard all those stories about him bulking up and trying to get in better shape, and I think
certainly did.
Just from he definitely did that, and I also think that there was just a mental aspect of it too that he had to sort of wrap his head around, and I think he's started to do that now. So maybe this means better things for him going forward. Over to wide receivers. Mohamed Sanu had a big night last night. The Patriots lost, but Sanu came out and got a ton of targets, was really productive with them. So, I mean, Graham, does this mean is this real or is this a mirage? I mean, can we think bigger things are coming from Mo Sanu now?
You know what? I kind of do, because if you go back and kind of look at how the Patriots are playing this year, they are not running the ball effectively whatsoever. I mean, they are like well under 3.5 yards per carry. Sony Michel basically didn't play yesterday. They played Rex Burkhead and James White.
By the way, that trend continued.
Yeah.
I talked about it all week. When Burkhead is active, you can't play Sony Michel with any kind of confidence. Unfortunately, that game was a Sunday night one, so you didn't know.
Yeah, I was going to say that the Patriots over the last couple weeks have just thrown the ball a ton. I mean, Brady has over 40 pass attempts now in 5 of his last 7 games. One of those games he had 39 pass attempts, so he was right on the cusp. And every single week they're just throwing the ball super short and playing the most boring pass offense ever. And Mohamed Sanu, as we know, is not going to beat people downfield. So if they're going to continue to have this high volume pass offense, short pass offense, they need somebody else that can function in the middle of the field. And I think they found it in Sanu. And I think that's kind of what they were going for. Is like they know that they don't really have a field stretcher. Brady can't throw it deep as much anymore, and they're running the ball. I mean, just completely ineffectively behind that offensive line right now. I think Sanu in PPR leagues could be a really sneaky receiver too moving forward here.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously the Patriots needed a receiver. That was why they went and added him in that trade. So.
And they needed a guy that they can lean on in the red zone, and that's big in fantasy, and that's what Sanu's going to be.
And they get Eagles in Week 11, Texans in Week 13 out of their bye. So pretty good spots for some even more pass volume here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I wrote in Things I Learned that the Devante Parker Parker breakout season is sort of underway, right? Like right now, he is on pace for a career high in receiving yards, and he's already tied his career high in touchdowns with 4. With Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback, the offense looks functional. They're moving the football. They're scoring points. They actually look like they know what they're doing out there. Throw in the fact that Preston Williams, who I know got a little banged up and is kind of getting checked out this week, but he's playing some good football as well. So, Fabs, are we cool with the Dolphins receivers right now?
I mean, it depends on the
relatively
matchup.
speaking.
It depends
right?
on the matchup. I mean, because we like Fitzpatrick under center for fantasy purposes. We don't want Josh Rosen. He could stay on the sidelines. Sorry, Josh. But Fitzpatrick is a guy who puts the Dolphins receivers into play for us, right, from a fantasy standpoint. And so if Williams is injured seriously, I mean, he's having an MRI. But right now, I mean, Parker's 4 touchdowns in his last 5 games. They've got the Colts coming up this week. Not as easy of a matchup as the Jets. But with 6 teams on a bye, I feel like as a flex or a 3, you could do worse than play Devante Parker, especially if Williams is it limited or unavailable because of the injury.
And they've got the 9th easiest wide receiver schedule the rest of the way, right? You mentioned the Colts this week. They've got the Bills in 2 weeks, which I don't know how you feel about that one, but
not good.
They've got the Browns, they've got the Eagles, they've got the Jets again, they've got the Giants, they've got the Bengals. I mean, there are a lot of good matchups for these guys down the stretch.
There are.
Devante Parker, touchdown machine. Who would have thunk?
Who would have thought, right?
I know, right? I mean, what is he in his 5th season now? I mean, it's been a while.
I mean,
we've been waiting for it.
We've been waiting for it, and it's finally starting to happen.
It's
right?
here, man.
It's finally starting to happen.
It's here when we all least expected it, when no one was drafting him, when we were all drafting even Albert Wilson.
Right. Exactly.
Bird alert. We're all taking bird alert, and now it's Devante Parker, but good for him.
Yeah, man. I mean,
he's gonna go somewhere and make himself a nice little chunk.
Of change, and he'll be like a secondary receiver who'll be pretty productive. So it'll sort of work out. Graham, it gets better for Keenan Allen, right? Like he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3.
He hasn't done anything since week 3.
I mean, I don't think he's had more than 61 receiving yards in any game since week 3, and it's just I can't figure out why. It's leaving me scared, but it gets better, right?
I thought it would get better this week with this spot, right? I mean, I thought the Packers would come in and at least be able to move the ball, but Phillip Rivers only had to throw it 28 times, and in the 2 prior weeks, Keenan was over double-digit targets again. Probably just got a little bit unlucky, just didn't have any big receptions and no touchdowns. But yeah, you mentioned it, man, that the yardage has completely fallen off a cliff over the last couple of weeks. He's been around 42 yards per game over the last 6 weeks. Hasn't scored. I want to say it gets better. Again, 2 decent matchup upcoming, like we mentioned with Melvin Gordon against the Raiders and Chiefs, should be 2 shootouts, and Keenan Allen can beat the Chiefs out of the slot. But man, it's just, to me right now, they have a lot of weapons that they're feeding, and if Keenan Allen, they don't have clear plays where Keenan Allen's the game plan target, it kind of seems like he's kind of slipping into just the secondary fold in this offense where Hunter Henry and Mike Williams and Allen, and now they're getting Gordon involved. It's just kind of this big, cohesive thing now. It's
Mike Williams
just Keenan Allen
had a good game. I think that was his first 100-yard game ever.
Yeah, and it's not just Keenan Allen getting fed 15 targets like we saw in the first couple weeks. It's,
right.
They're actually spreading the ball around here.
Over to the quarterbacks. Fabs, are we back to worrying about Aaron Rodgers, or was yesterday just sort of a weird hiccup that happened?
It was strange. I will say this, though. He has one of the hardest schedules among quarterbacks for the rest of the season.
Right.
I talked about that on the TV side last week. And also, let's keep in mind that, Rodgers still had, I believe, 4 games with fewer than 15 fantasy points this season. He started off really slowly, and then he had, just 3 or 4 just monster games in a row, so he kind of got back into our good graces. But you're probably starting him most weeks, Marcus, but I still feel like those matchups down the stretch, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's got the Bears and the Vikings in the last 2 weeks of the fantasy postseason. That's not attractive.
Great.
Minnesota, they're beatable through the air, I guess, so that's not as bad. But, Chicago's a tough matchup for any quarterback in the league right now. I guess not named Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. So he's still going to end up being in starting lineups. It was a disappointment yesterday without question. And they have Carolina coming up at Lambeau Field. He's probably going to be under center. Guys, we got 6 teams off.
Yeah. It's true. But going back and looking at Rodgers' year this year, it's just kind of been all over the place, right? He's had that huge game against the Eagles where he threw for over 400 yards, and obviously he had the huge game against the Raiders. Had a good one last week against the Chiefs, but outside of that, it's just kind of been a ho-hum year for Rodgers this year. And you mentioned the schedule down the stretch, probably not great for him. But yeah, Niners, when they come out of their bye in Week 12, I'm really excited for that game. Packers, Niners.
That should be fun.
That's going to be a really, really good
That's
game.
going to be like shades of the old Steve Young throwing the ball to Torello, and the Packers converge, and he continues on into the end zone. That was a very memorable play.
Yeah, that was.
Remember that one?
I remember that game because
as a Niners fan, of course.
Oh, I also remember because I think T.O. was actually really hurt in that game, and he took a wicked shot on that game-winning touchdown,
yep.
and everybody's trying to celebrate it. He was in obvious pain, just trying to get up off the turf. We talked a little bit about the Broncos earlier, and like I said, I'm curious to kind of go back and watch this game and see what happened. But Graham, Brandon Allen, thoughts?
Yeah, I went and looked. So the Broncos only ran 43 offensive plays yesterday. 43.
Not a lot.
The Browns still lost. I just don't understand how that's possible. I get it. Noah Fant had the big play, and Brandon Allen definitely hit, on that opening drive. That Cortland Sutton touchdown.
That catch was ridiculous.
That was a thing of beauty.
That was sick.
But yeah, I mean, Brandon, they basically didn't have the ball on offense. I mean, Phillip Lindsay ripped off a big play. It kind of seemed like they just had a few chunk plays there, and that was really kind of it for fantasy and for Brandon Allen. So I don't know if we really know too much about Brandon Allen after that game, but hats off to the Broncos, man. The Browns are expected to come in here and at least compete, I guess. And the Broncos didn't roll over, and they only needed a few plays to do it. Brandon Allen only threw the ball 20 times yesterday, guys.
Right.
That's it.
Which honestly is I kind of expected that they would try to maybe not hide him, but sort of protect him a little bit. And it just so happened that he came out early and kind of got hot, made some good throws, got some nice plays behind him to really help out. But I do think that, I don't know that we can read too much into what happened and suddenly think that Brandon Allen is a viable fantasy starter for you. It just happened to really work out for him on Sunday. Okay, Fabs, who would you rather at this point? Carson Wentz or Jameis Winston?
I'd rather have Jameis.
Yeah. I think so too.
The schedule is bananas good for him down the stretch. The Buccaneers have the easiest schedule among quarterbacks for the rest of the season. Seattle, listen, these ain't your daddy Seahawks. They're not good defensively, especially against the pass. And now he's got Arizona coming up. So and Wentz, he was dropped in one of my leagues. I picked him up because he's got a couple of matchups where I'm going to be able to use him down the stretch. But Philadelphia, they have the 9th hardest schedule among quarterbacks the rest of the season. And, Carson is in a really bad stretch right now where he has Chicago, he said Buffalo. They are on a bye, I believe, coming up. But he's a guy who you drafted to be your QB1, but he's a matchup-based starter.
Right.
And the matchup's been brutally bad for him. And as much as you worry about Winston because he has those horrible games like he had overseas where he turned the ball over 100 times. But then you watch him play yesterday, and he went head to freaking head with the best quarterback in the league right now.
Yeah.
He really did.
Jameis played extremely well yesterday.
Played very well.
Outside of that one fumble where the ball kind of flew up in the middle of the air. He
played very
really
well. Yeah. I mean, and now he's got Arizona.
Well, and if you go back and you look at his performances week to week, right? He had bad performances against defenses that are pretty good. I mean, everybody looks at week 1 against the Niners, but now you look back on it and you're like, oh, well, the Niners have done that to a lot of people now, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't look quite as bad as it used to. I mean, the Panthers, he had 2 not so great games against Carolina. I don't know that there's a whole lot of shame in that necessarily, but the favorable matchups, I mean, he's crushed. I mean, he beat up on the Giants. He crushed the Rams, which I think still opened a lot of eyes, especially at the time, to come to Los Angeles and do that. But he played well against the Titans. He played well against the Seahawks. And as you mentioned, the schedule's great for him. I mean, he's got the Cardinals. He's got the Falcons one more time. He's got the Lions. He's got the Texans. These are games in which he can go out and perform really well.
Yep.
I wrote last week in Tired Wire that Jameis might end up winning some fantasy championships. You're not starting him each and every week, but you play him in the right spots, he can get you to the playoffs, and he can probably win you a fantasy title somewhere. So, all right, so let's look at week 9. I went through and I wanted to do some little fact or fiction. So I came up with 3 statements, and I'll put them to you guys, and you can tell me whether you think these are fact or fiction about things we have seen, whether it's all season or the last few weeks or what have you. First one. The Bills' defense is good against the run. That was something I think we seemed to believe, and I think we were sort of hesitant to play some running backs against them. I know that, we were sort of so-so on Adrian Peterson this week. He smashed. The week before, I mean, the Eagles kind of ran through the Buffalo Bills. And you look at it, they're sort of middle of the road in terms of their run defense. So, I mean, are they still a good run defense and they just had a couple of bad weeks, or were we giving them maybe too much credit?
I think with almost every matchup in the NFL outside of obvious ones like the Bucs defense is really freaking good. I think most matchups come down to the offense. It's not necessarily the defense, and we know what the Redskins have wanted to do with Bill Callahan, and they have a whole 18 points to show for it over the last 3 weeks, but they just run the ball and drain the clock. I mean, they've had under 50 offensive snaps now in 3 straight games, and I think a little bit of yesterday's game was Peterson, one, just getting fed the rock relentlessly, but he's also still really good.
Yeah.
I mean,
Crazy.
he's still it blows my mind how much burst and pop he has in the middle of the season after dealing with an ankle sprain.
Yeah, I mean
he's
this
just ridiculous.
is a Hall of Fame running back,
Yeah.
and that performance yesterday, sort of. I've been picking up Darius Geis in all the leagues I can get him. If you look at his schedule, it's very favorable down the stretch. I mean, they have the Jets coming off of a Week 10 bye. They've got Detroit. Carolina's been getting crushed by running backs. They got Green Bay. Like every matchup, Marcus, except for Philly, right? Then you got the Giants in Week 16.
Right.
The matchups are really good, and I'm hoping that Darius, I would still pick him up in any league that he's out there, especially if you have a reserve spot on NFL.com where you could just throw him in there until he comes back and he's activated. But, I mean, that performance from Peterson, made me pause a little bit. Man, maybe Darius isn't going to get the starting job back right away.
Well, and even if he does, I can't imagine after a litany of injuries that they're going to give him just a huge workload. That he's still going to kind of rotate in. I think even when it happens,
They have to, because Peterson is one, still playing exceptionally well, and I don't think they can trust Darius Geis to stay healthy and so in the same sort of featured role that Peterson's been getting over the last few weeks.
The one thing I will say about Bill Callahan, to his credit, is he runs a pretty tight ship in terms of getting those guys on and off the field, man. Like Washington games, they're quick now. Like they're getting out of there in like 2.5 hours. So like kudos to you, man.
Yeah, that Bills Redskins game ended in like 2 hours yesterday.
Yeah.
And the Panthers Titans was like starting the fourth quarter, and the Bills Redskins game was like in their final. I'm like, what the hell?
Seriously,
happened?
like Bill Callahan is coaching like he's double parked, and so good on you.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Good on you for that. All right, next one. Austin Hooper is a tight end 1 play the rest of the year. I mean, right now he is the tight end 1. I don't necessarily expect him to finish as the tight end 1. But I mean, Graham, he can be a tight end 1 the rest of the season at this point, right?
Oh yes, and this is something we've talked about on the show all year. It's just the Falcons' ineptitude and their just general sucking has really helped. Has really helped this pass offense. I mean, they're just extremely high volume, and we'll see how this offense kind of plays out now that Mohamed Sanu's gone too. But I mean, Sanu is seeing 15-16% of the team's targets, and now there's even more volume to go around here.
Yep. Yeah. No question about that. So, Hooper's been. I mean, damn. I think we said this last week, right? At this point in the season, would you rather have taken Travis Kelce in the first or second round, or Hooper way late? No brainer. I'd rather have Hooper.
Oh yeah, I mean
Hooper has done. He has been better than advertised, and as you mentioned, without Sanu in the offense, the red zone opportunities could potentially grow a little bit more, and he is going to get targeted a ton in an offense that throws the ball a ton.
he's in the running for best draft bargain of the season. I think without a doubt.
No doubt.
So last one.
Him and Darren Waller.
Him and Darren Waller for sure. Bellatrix are back in the Patriots' backfield. Like, look, James White's still doing his thing. I mean, there's the Rex Burkhead, there's the Sony Michel. Like, are we back to not being able to decipher, or is it still as simple as when Burkhead plays, you don't play Michel?
Rex Burkhead screwed everything up for us. He screwed everything up for us. I mean, no fault of his own. He just wants to get out and play. But every time, and it doesn't affect James White, but every time Burkhead has been on the field, Sony Michel has been a disappointment. Going into this past weekend, Michel was averaging fewer than 7 fantasy points per game in games where Burkhead was active. 17 points per game where Burkhead is out. The last 2 games, Burkhead has been active. Sony Michel has been a disappointment. And there is no coincidence in that trend, guys.
Yeah, it's true. And Michel last night had 4 carries. That's it, 4. The Patriots obviously got behind, and they really couldn't get into their run sets. But he only played 22% of the team's snaps. Moving forward, there's going to be games where Michel is going to have multiple touchdowns, but it's really hard to trust Michel in your lineups, especially in PPR leagues because he's just not going to catch any passes,
If
especially if Burkhead's going to continue to play.
If this is going to be what the Bills' backfield is the rest of the season, Michel is going to be solely dependent on scoring touchdowns to be productive in your fantasy lineup.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know people were. I sort of believe that they were going to start leaning on him down the stretch, but I don't know that that's going to happen. Especially
this year's different, man. Especially with their offensive line, they're struggling a little bit, and they're having to throw a bunch to stay in games. I think this year is different in that sense.
Very well could be. Looking at the waiver wire as you get ready to put in your claims for the week, it is a decent-sized list for you. Zach Pascal is out there with the news, obviously, that T.Y. Hilton could miss multiple weeks. It happened right after I traded for him in the league.
By the way, it's funny because you said Pascal. It's actually Pascal.
Is it Pascal?
But I say Pascal, too, and it's because of Pet Sematary.
Oh, I think.
Do you remember that? You remember the character in that, Pascal?
Maybe.
That was the guy who ended up being the ghost who was trying to warn the father not to go into the pet cemetery. So I've said Pascal,
I feel like
but it's not. It's Pascal.
I feel like there's some guy that I learned about like in high school chemistry or something. It was like Pascal.
It's Pascal because Rhett Lewis corrected me on that last week. I'm like, oh, are you sure?
Oh.
Yeah, Rhett would know.
Right,
okay, it's Pascal.
So Zach Pascal.
There you go.
Sorry, Zach. My bad. So he's out there, especially with T.Y. Hilton expected to be out for who knows how many weeks right now. He becomes a viable play there, especially after having a big game on Sunday. Kareem Hunt is due back next week, right? He's available for the Browns. I wonder what his workload is going to – because Nick Chubb has been very good this year.
I know.
Even as the Browns have struggled, Nick Chubb has not been part of the
I'm not even
problem.
worried about it initially, like in the first week, because Chubb's he's gonna dominate the carries, and I think Hunt needs to get sort of back into the rhythm of actually playing in real football games, but I hope that doesn't turn into I don't think it will, but I really hope it doesn't because that would suck.
I will say Chubb's snaps have been down over the last couple weeks, and I wonder if they're kind of like. They've got to have some sort of role in mind for Kareem Hunt because their second running back this year they've just been rotating their guys, so they'll probably get Hunt involved in some way. But I'm with you though, Fabs. I definitely don't think Chubb is going to lose that early down role.
Yep.
Let's see. Next up, Ronald Jones. We talked about him and what his future potentially is in Tampa for the rest of the season. Brian Hoyer mentioned him at the start of the show with Jacoby Brissett week to week and 6 teams on a bye this week. Brian Hoyer is going to be, I'm sure, a popular ad. Hunter Renfro, who I think has touchdowns in back-to-back games now and is really kind of starting to get more looks in that offense.
He just looks like a 45-year-old accountant.
Oh yeah,
so funny.
He does not look like a football player whatsoever.
Exactly.
No.
Like if I met him and I didn't know who he was, and he said, "Hey, Hunter Renfro. Hey, so what do you do for work? Car salesman, insurance. Like what do you? I play for the Oakland Raiders. What?
Yeah.
Are you the kicker?
Yeah.
No, I'm their sliders. What?
And he's
wow.
only 23.
I know. Hey, God bless him.
He actually looks like he would, if for those of you who watch NBA basketball.
There is no way he is 23.
According to the internet,
he's got the same issue as Jordan Spieth. He's got the hairline issues.
Yeah,
I think
true.
I would imagine he would be friends with anybody who watches the Lakers. Alex Caruso, who. My girlfriend.
Oh yes, yeah.
My girlfriend and I joke. We call him Ralph's because he looks like he would be a grocery store manager and not an NBA player.
Wow.
Another kind of young guy who has the balding up top look and who looks significantly older than he probably actually is. I imagine him and Alex Caruso is 25, who and he looks like he's literally like 41.
Yeah.
They do look alike too.
Yeah. I'd imagine the two of them, like I could see them being friends and like hanging out, and having backyard cookouts together.
Just
incredible.
Two old-looking young guys hanging out.
Basically. Hunter Renfro, he's on the waiver wire. You might want to go pick him up this week. Daniel Jones is out there. Again, that has to do with a lot of quarterbacks being out this week, and so Jones is a worthwhile pickup. Jamison Crowder, as I think a lot of us expected, kind of had a nice week. He was about the only Jet that was really productive on Sunday, and a lot of that came like in the first half for Jamison Crowder.
Came on the first drive. He had like 4 catches for 50 yards.
By the way, Sam Darnold, what the?
Yeah,
I mean, what, dude? It's the Dolphins.
He's
like,
the mess
what
right
was
now.
So I missed it. So the catch that was at the back of the end zone,
Ryan Griffin.
How was that not a touchdown?
Don't know.
You're asking the wrong person.
How was that not a touchdown? I saw the replay like 4 or 5. Like,
no
how
one
is
knows.
that? Like, what happens where like it wasn't a touchdown?
No one knows.
Eddie, do you have any idea? Because I mean, that would have salvaged his stat line a little bit. But I was like, Am I missing something? And like send me a tweet.
No one knows.
I don't know what
which to me, like if we can't get that on replay, then what are we doing?
His feet were down.
What are we doing?
His feet were down, right? I mean, his feet were down, and it looked like he could control the ball. I don't get it.
As the season has gone on, I have started to adopt Marcus's view of just pretty much ban replay or make it so much freaking faster.
Yeah, it just I don't get it. It like we're not doing anything except slowing the games down for no apparent reason. If we can't get things like that right, then there's just no point to it.
I couldn't even believe that they were taking a look at it. It was just a great touchdown.
It just looked like a nice catch.
Yeah. There was nothing to look at.
Honestly, I'm going to have to look at it again. But, I didn't see a juggle. I mean, I don't know what.
I was 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles, and I could tell you it was a touchdown.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Whatever.
That's probably not a good good indictment on the.
It is not. Yeah. Not at all. Let's see. Other names. Ryan Fitzpatrick we've talked about. We talked a little bit about the Dolphins receivers, Devante Parker, Preston Williams, and again, he's getting an MRI this week, speaking of Williams, so that's just something to keep an eye on. But if it's all good, if he's a go, that offense is starting to kind of roll a little bit. And, they're at least worth a flex option for you, depending on what your lineup is. Last one, Jacob Hollister, who had a pair of touchdowns this past week. Only 37 yards, but we are thirsty for tight ends.
He's the new Will Dissly. All right, maybe not. But
maybe.
And they're playing the Niners coming up, so I don't know if I'd necessarily want to pick him up. But I guess at this point, the tight end position is driving me out of my freaking mind every week trying to do this for stardom and sit him because there's certain guys. You're playing Hooper, you can't put him in there. You're playing Waller, you can't put him in there. You can't put Kelsey in there. So there's certain guys it's just too obvious. But the rest of it is just a whole. Even Mark Andrews, I had him as a sit last week, and he wasn't this past week, and he wasn't any good. But Noah Fant came out of nowhere with that freaking long touchdown. Even Kyle Rudolph scored a touchdown, and people aren't playing these guys. I really want to see. And Fells, right? A lot of people streamed Fells. He had one catch.
It was a
catch
touchdown.
For 1 yard.
Worked out.
It was a touchdown.
Worked
so
out.
then, he gave you 7 points, which is pretty good. But even Hawkinson, he had a good game, his best game since week 1.
Right.
But it was sort of blah. It was like 7 or 8 points. It was okay, you take it. That's how bad tight end is right now.
The good news is
horrible to predict.
The good news is with 6 teams on a bye, the only tight end that's regularly getting started that you're losing is probably Zach Ertz, right? Because you're not really. It's Broncos. You're not really starting Noah Fant.
It was good to see him back.
I guess maybe Darren Fells with the Texans being out. The Jaguars don't have a tight end. The Patriots don't really have a tight end. Washington, you're not. Is Vernon Davis even playing? He's hurt, right?
No, he's been hurt too.
So
he's been hurt.
So
but
Zach
overall,
Ertz is the only
even
guy
with
you're
those
really
6 teams in, you're like, what the hell do I do, man? It's just week in and week out. If you don't have one of those guys that you're starting every single week. It is honestly just throwing darts. I want to have the research guys at one point, maybe towards the end of the season, find out what percentage of the best tight end performances have been wasted.
Yeah.
Because who really has started Darren Fells over the last few weeks until this week where he had a touchdown but nothing else?
Yeah, so looking into leagues based on the top 10 scores, let's say, and whomever was started in less than 15% of leagues, I bet you a lot of
a ton.
Yeah, dude, a lot. How many people started Noah Fant this week?
No.
How many people knew who Hollister was?
Yeah.
Right.
Who aren't industry folk.
Yeah.
I just.
It's been and it sucks too because this season, in the beginning of the season,
we had
it
such
seemed
hope for the tight end position.
we did because there was a lot of youth, an influx of youth, and Fant was coming into the league, and Hawkinson was coming into the league.
Man,
gosh. Yeah. And I will say this, guys, for stardom and sit-em this week with 6 teams on a bye, just bear with me. Be all right, because I'm throwing darts left and right at thin positions. Just bear with me. The info's good. Just bear with me.
Real quick on tight ends, Will Dissly is still the 10th best fantasy tight end this year, and he is basically played in only 5 games.
So he hasn't played in a month, right?
Gosh.
He hasn't played in a month, and he's still top 10 tight end.
That's where we're at.
Man, that is bad. So happy hunting on the waiver wire, especially if you need a tight end this week. Good luck to you. So that's it. We are done. We appreciate you listening and downloading. You know the drill, as always. Tell 2 friends to tell 2 friends. Rate, review, and remember, you never know what you have until you clean your room. We'll see you on Wednesday.